Yeah, my name is Avery Volz. I'm the author of To the One I Love, To Now and Forever, and my upcoming book, Gray Matter, which comes out October 10th of this year.
And then, since this is, the Fox 43 Book Club and we're all about central Pennsylvania, can you just tell me what your ties to Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I grew up here. I grew up in York, Pennsylvania, so I went to York Suburban High School. I'm a student at Penn State York, upcoming senior actually, which is really exciting, and I've lived here my whole life.
And then, tell me about what inspired To the One I Love.
Yeah, To the One I Love was inspired by some really hard lessons that I had to learn when I was in high school, just about, learning to love yourself instead of taking what other people say against you. I was in some really sticky situations that I had to get myself out of, and I really had to work on my mental health, and I really had to learn to connect with other people who really love me and value me. So that's kind of what inspired it.
So would you describe it as autobiographical at all, or?
It's not autobiographical, it's definitely a narrative, so there are fictitious elements of it, but I would say there is some very brief inputs of who I am in my characters.
So more inspired by the autobiography.
Yeah.
And then, can you just talk about the two main characters, your inspiration behind them, how you build their personalities, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so Abigail and Colton are very close to my heart because they are the first characters of the first book that I wrote. And I really came up with their characters just by planning and plotting. There's elements of myself in Abigail. For example, she loves music, she loves the violin. I used to play the violin. I wasn't good at it, but she's an excellent violin player. She loves to write like I love to write, so there's definitely elements of myself in her. Colton is actually not inspired by anybody, but he's just someone who, I would want to see myself with in the future, someone who's kind and caring and just really loyal and a good partner.
So I don't know if I would call them flashbacks since it's kind of flash forwards, but what made you decide to write the book as like jumping between time periods?
Yeah, so the jump between time was always a stylistic element that I wanted to play around with. I love books that jump between time. I always feel like they form a really cohesive story, and I wanted to give that a shot. And I feel like it really worked for this book because having this older woman sit down to reflect on her life is, I feel like, what a lot of people do toward the end of their life. They sit down and they're very reflective of all the good times and the bad times they've had, and I wanted to tell the story through that lens.
So can you talk a little about your decision? I just got to this part, so I don't know what entirely all you did, but your decision to kind of include COVID, but not at the same time.
Right, yeah. So COVID is not necessarily a part of it, but I do have a pandemic in the book. When I was writing this, it was during quarantine, so I didn't really know what was going to happen. I didn't know if this was going to be our new forever, if it was going to be permanent, and I wanted to include that because I knew a lot of people who would read the book eventually would say, oh yeah, I totally went through that. And then there's a scene, not to spoil it, but there's a scene later where she is explaining COVID to somebody, not COVID, but this pandemic in her life, to someone very important to her. And he says, well, that's crazy, that was in my history book today. And she goes, yeah, that's what's gonna happen in the future. We're gonna sit down in these history classes and kids are gonna start reading about COVID and they're gonna say, wow, my mom or my dad lived through that. That was crazy, what was that like? So I wanted to sort of commemorate it in a way, not that it's a good thing, but that it's something that changed a lot of people and I feel like should be remembered for that.
Absolutely. Like I said, I just got to this part, so I haven't gotten a whole lot into it, but I thought it was interesting too. I was kind of dealing with an on and off relationship during COVID, so it's really interesting to see that kind of reflected in the book and how that intersects,
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're thinking about it all when you were writing it, but it's just something cool to see.
Yeah, well, and also just how I felt during the pandemic. I felt very isolated, but I also felt freer from some of the things that I was dealing with in high school. It gave me space to heal and to think and to really come into myself. So I think that that's something that Abigail sort of experiences herself, and you'll see that as you read more.
Okay. And then, can you talk a little bit about your writing process and what a typical writing day would look like for you?
Oh yeah, sure. So I love going to Starbucks to write. I know that's like a typical writer thing to say, but it actually is like my happy place to write. So I try to write every single day, even if it's just a few sentences. I feel some people feel guilty when they don't like work out for a day. Like I feel guilty if I don't write for a day, and it's just like such a part of who I am that I love it so much. And so I'll get my bag together, I'll go to Starbucks and I'll just sit in the corner and write for maybe 2-3 hours. And that's something that's very special to me because and even like the people in Starbucks know me now. Like they're like, "Hi Avery, when's the new book coming out?" And I'm like, "It's coming, I promise, it's on its way." And that's just a super special connection that I've made through writing, which I've made a lot of connections through writing, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sweet that they're like, oh, cheering for you.
Right, yeah. They're fantastic people in there, yeah.
That's awesome. And I know we talked about this a little bit before, but like, have you noticed your writing style like change or develop or anything like over the years that you've been writing?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel that I actually never took a writing class until I was a freshman in college. So I wrote To the One I Love and To Now and Forever when I was 17. And I got to college, I turned 19. I took my first writing class with Professor Noel Sloboda, which shout out to him. He's awesome. He has taught me so much about character development, about plot, and he really, one of the biggest things he taught me was that if you know the character, the story will write itself. And that's something that has stuck with me ever since I took that first class with him. And I feel that my style has grown. I feel that it's become a little more adult in the way that I approach writing, because To the One I Love and To Now and Forever are more young adult and kind of growing in that sense. But I feel like the more I get older, the more my writing is going to get older as well. So I feel like I was talking with a friend recently, and he said, for those of you who really know who I am, you can see how I've grown in my writing and how there are pieces of me in all of my projects that, like, if you didn't know me personally, like, you would know, wow, like, she's really growing in that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. It's almost like instead of, like, marking your height off on the wall,
Right,
like,
right. I'm marking, like, my life journey on the wall. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
Really cool. I'm sure it'll be cool, like we were talking about reflecting when you're older, when you're much older, to go back and be like, wow, I
right.
wrote this.
And even reflecting, when I'm older, on how much I've accomplished in my writing, and feeling very grateful for the opportunities that I've had to be able to sit down and say, I'm a published author, which is just crazy and amazing, and that's my dream come true. So, yeah.
Want to become an author, or like what was your journey, I guess, to getting here?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a published author. Ever since I was 8 years old, I tell everybody this. I had a little journal that my mom and dad got me for my birthday, I think, and it had like lollipops on it, and I treated it as a diary, and I would say, like, "Dear diary, today my sister stole my crayon and I'm never talking to her again." Like, so just silly stuff like that. But I was like, no, like, I really want to be somebody who changes people's lives through words, and I really want to be somebody who's inspirational in that way. And I was writing poetry when I was like 10. I wrote short stories when I was 10, and then I started planning a book when I was 13. That book has never seen the light of day. It probably will not, unfortunately, because I've grown so much past that, but I'm very grateful to say that I've kept that dream and have accomplished it.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And do you have any advice for anybody who wants to become a writer?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just sit down and write. And it's one thing to, say, I don't have time for that, or I don't feel like I could be the best writer. You need to stop those thoughts in your head, and you need to say, if something is in my brain and it's churning around and it won't go away, that means it needs to be written, and somebody needs to read that story. So I always say, if you're feeling a certain way and it needs to be written, then it needs to be. And I'm really excited for people to jump into their own dreams and to realize that they can be an author as well, and that we can change the world together, one book at a time.
And now, can you tell us about your future projects?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm so excited. So Gray Matter is my third book. It's coming out October 10th of this year, 2024. And it is about mental health and learning to love somebody who struggles with a mental health disorder and learning when it's time to take a step back to protect your own mental health. The main character, she's a poet from New York City, so she's very famous, very up there, and the love of her life struggles with bipolar disorder. So it's all about, you know, she's finally going to get a chance to be with him, but what does that really look like, and how do you support somebody who's struggling? And I feel like that's very prevalent in today's society because mental health, there's a crisis out there, and I really want to end the stigma around mental health. Like, we all have mental health, and you know, some people will go to the doctor for a physical ailment, but then they won't go see a therapist for anything that they're struggling with mentally, and that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, we really need to bridge the gap and be cognizant of our mental health and even mental illness and helping people and just being kind. That's what this book is mostly about, just being kind to people. You never know what they're struggling with, so yeah.
I'm excited to read it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and then that was all the questions I had. If there's anything that you wanted to add, feel free.
I just want to give a shout out to my mom and my dad. They are awesome. They've been supporting me this whole time. My mama as well, who has just been so supportive of me my whole journey and have never been put down in any way, and are just always kind and loving, and I love them so much. So I just had to say that.